essentially the same thing as an informational interview. Have you guys heard either of those terms before? Okay, so an informational interview is where you sit down or Zoom or call with somebody and you ask them questions about their career path and their job and their organization, those kind of things. It is not an interview for a job, and you should not ask for a job. And so several years ago, informational interviews got a really bad rep because people would ask for an informational interview and then expect a job to come out of it. And so I've kind of moved away from using that term informational interview, and I use career conversation because I feel like that captures it better. If you're talking to somebody about their career path, getting some advice from them, learning best practices, there's a lot of really positive things that can come out of that. And technically, one of the positives is that you could potentially land a job or be introduced to somebody who could get you a job. So the statistic that I read most recently is that 1 in 12 informational interviews will end up in a job. And that might be like somebody introduces you to somebody else, or you do have the conversation with somebody, and then the next year, you know, a year down the road, they're like, oh yeah, I talked to this really great person, and then they reach back out to you. So it's not like it's a job right away, and that's 1 in 12. So if you're thinking that you're going to do like 1 or 2 of these, it's probably not realistic, right? You're building that whole spider web, and so you need to have a lot of these types of conversations. So where can you network? So again, Google is going to be our friend for this. So you can Google organizations. That was one of the areas that was pretty light on most of your pages, was what companies do this kind of work, or what companies could I possibly work at? And I think that the issue there is that we know a lot of B2C organizations, so business to consumer. So we know the people whose goods we can buy, right? And the things that they produce. But that's a really actually small percentage of jobs that are out there. A lot of jobs are B2B, so business services to businesses, or, you know, behind the scenes companies that we're not really going to be familiar with their names, okay? And so if you can, you know, work on the other pieces, the job titles, the keywords, those type of things, and do some Google searching. And so maybe, you know, it's a keyword that you put into Google and a location. And so maybe you want to use, give me a type of editing software. Okay, so you want to use Photoshop in a job. So look for Photoshop plus company plus or job plus Portland, right? And so that would be a Google search where you could pull up either job postings or organizations that use Photoshop as part of their work, right? So, so that's how you can kind of generate more companies. Also, those Indeed lists will be great because that'll give you company names that you've never even considered before or didn't even know they existed. Industry specific organizations is also a great thing. So if you are part of a professional association, you can join as a student member for a pretty hefty discount. You can see who else is a member of this organization. So I saw when I was looking at who RSVP'd for this event, a lot of public health students. And so maybe there's a public health professional association, and you can see who their members are and where they work. And so then you can get ideas of other places that you can work. We also have a really cool tool that's attached to, that you can find through our ACA website. And it's called What Can I Do With My Major In? And it breaks it down by the, pick my kid up for piano lessons. Sorry, guys. So you can go through and it will tell you different types of industry. So like government jobs, private practice jobs, like county jobs, you know, all sorts of different types of industries, and then which kind of organizations. And then there's some professional associations, but then also some like major specific job boards that you can look through. So that's a really great tool to kind of build these lists up and come up with more options. We also have a great tool called the Book of Lists. It's a book put out by the Portland Business Journal. Every area business journal does one every year, but it'll rank like the top green companies or the, you know, top places to work, or, you know, they'll have a category that they will rank organizations. And so then you can see, okay, well, these are the 25 best medium-sized companies to work for in Portland. Half of them you may never have heard of. And so that's a good way to be exposed to other places. Another really great tool is LinkedIn. So I don't know that we'll have any time to get to it, but I borrowed some of these slides from basically a LinkedIn presentation. And so I have about 25 slides about LinkedIn. And so we have tons of information in our office, and you're welcome to come in and talk to any of us about setting up a LinkedIn profile. But I think the best thing that I can tell you is that LinkedIn is a professional social media site, right? So it's maintained by the person. The person puts up their information, but you can see their resume. You can see the companies they worked at. You can see who they're connected to. You can also do a search by what university they went to and what they majored in, and you can see if somebody might be a good connection. That's often a good place to start when you're networking, just because you already have something in common, right? It's a little bit easier to reach out to somebody who you know has literally sat in the seats that you're sitting in, right? They graduated from Pacific with the same degree as you. Doesn't that feel a little bit more comfortable than reaching out to some random person who has this really cool job at this organization you've never heard of? It's a little bit easier when you can say, oh yeah, you know, we have this thing in common. So I would use LinkedIn to find career trajectories. The other thing is, because people put basically their resumes, you can see, okay, their first job out of college, maybe you have like, you know, the job titles that you can think of are 10 years down the road. That's not what you're going to do when you're an entry-level employee, right out of college. And so you can look and see, okay, this person is doing this job now, but when they graduated college, they did this internship, or they worked at this company, or this was their title. And then you get a little bit more realistic perspective of where you might go first, right? And then there's Google, right? I already mentioned this. And so maybe this is those interests and causes and hobbies that you wrote down first. Maybe you really want to work for an organization. Maybe one of your work values is that you want to work for an organization that values the environment. So you type in green companies, Portland, and you can find a list of like the top companies that have, I don't know, green initiatives. So whatever it is that is important to you, there's lots of ways to find it. Okay, so all of this comes down to building your network. And so, yeah, you can click a button on LinkedIn and say, add to your network. But remember, we talked about at the beginning, it's not transactional. It's not just a one or done. You want to build a relationship so that you're a person that they think of. And so I would recommend that as you're building your network, you consider somebody in your network when you've had an actual conversation with them. So something over Zoom or over the phone or in person if you're comfortable with that. And so that's the rest of this is all going to be about how do you have these conversations? How do you have a career conversation or an informational interview? And so the first thing to do is do your homework, right? So you've obviously done some homework if you found this person, right? You need to reach out, and the bottom of this page has a sample email that you could send to them. You want to make it easy to say yes. People want to help. There's a story I heard recently about Benjamin Franklin, and there's this thing called the Benjamin Franklin effect. And so he had somebody who did not like him and was always writing critiques into their newspaper and saying all these horrible things about him. And so he's like, I bet I could change his opinion. And so he knew that this person had a really extensive library. And so he asked to borrow a very specific book that he knew, Benjamin Franklin knew that this guy had. And the guy's like, well, yeah, I guess. And so he let Benjamin borrow the book, and Benjamin read it. He returned it and he said, hey, can I borrow this book? And so they ended up becoming friendly. I don't know if they ever became friends, but the Benjamin Franklin effect is really this idea that you can change somebody's opinion because they don't want to do a favor for somebody they don't like, right? So instead of, this is a little bit separate from what you guys will be doing, because you have to assume that they don't dislike you to start, right? They like you, or they will like you, but you just have to kind of build that rapport and build that relationship. But he built that relationship so that the guy kept doing favors for him. And nobody wants to think about doing a favor for somebody that they dislike, right? And so this guy stopped all of his criticism of Benjamin Franklin, and they basically called a truce. And it was because he had been doing these favors. And so it was this really tricky way for him to kind of manipulate the relationship. And so thinking about that, people want to help. And so how can you make it easy for them to say yes? So a short timeline. When you're talking about these career conversations, I'm not talking about an hour. I'm not talking about a shadow for the day. I'm talking about 10 or 15 minutes. That's about all you want to ask for, because almost everybody can say, yeah, I can fit you in for 10 or 15 minutes. You want to be really flexible about the timing of when you're available. That's another factor. You can't be like, I'm only available from 4 to 4:30 on every other Thursday. That's not helpful to a busy professional, right? And then as you're getting ready to interview them, you want to like use the information you know about them and their organization. You want to use the information you know about yourself and plan really strategic questions to get at the heart of what you want from them. So again, remember at the very beginning, I had you write out what do you want from this interaction. And so that's what you're thinking about too, as you're planning this conversation. Okay, so you want to, like I said, think about the audience perspective. They're busy, but people like to feel good, and you feel good when you help someone, right? And so if you can frame it in that sense and have them like be really like over excited about the conversation you get to have, this would be really great. You know, I'm really curious about your path. And, you know, if you can kind of make it seem like they're doing you a favor, but also that like they're really going to help you out, that you really value their opinion. I think that that's a good way to kind of frame your correspondence with them. You want to be succinct and focused. You want to come across as organized and mature. Like you already have a plan, so you're not going to waste the 15 minutes if they give it to you. And you want to be transparent. If you have a connection to them, tell them, right? If you're reaching out to a Pacific alum, tell them, because they'll be more interested in saying yes. Tell them how you found them and tell them why you're reaching out. So what is the outcome that you're hoping to achieve from this conversation? Is it that you want to know what entry-level positions in a county public health office is actually like? That's great, say that. And then you want to be respectful, and you want to be really polite, and you want to be grateful. You want to make sure that they understand that you really appreciate them taking the time to chat with you. Oops, I think did I hit that twice? Yeah. Okay, so this is the sample outreach. And so this student does a lot of those things, right? So explains who they are. I'm a kinesiology sophomore at Pacific, considering a career in nutrition and doing some research to uncover helpful ideas, information, advice. That's what they're looking for. As a fellow boxer, that's how they found them. And as someone working as a nutritionist, your LinkedIn profile caught my eye. Would you be available, or would you be willing to have a conversation with me? I'd love the chance to ask you a few questions about your work and career path. So you're being very clear about what you want to talk about. And it's not, I want a job, right? I'm open to any timeline that works for you for a 15-minute conversation. 15 minutes. When was the last time, Mike's the boss at ACA. He's very busy. When was the last time you said no to somebody who asked for just 15 minutes? What's the last time I went? Said no to somebody who asked for 15 minutes of your time. I've heard the others say no. So. The 15 minutes is really easy to say yes to. Yeah. And then you want to be really open to the way to connect, right? You could do it over Zoom, you could do it over phone, email, in person. I'm really open. What's best for you? What are you comfortable with? And then, you know, what is most convenient to you? If this is really busy time for you, this is a key too. I'd be happy to check back in the future. So even if they're too busy now to do it and they say, yeah, now's not good, contact me in a month. At least you know that. And that's actually building the network, because when you reach back out in a month, they'll remember, oh yeah, I told them to contact me in another month. And you've already built a piece of this rapport with them. Or is there somebody else I could follow up? Is there a colleague you'd like to suggest? Follow up with a colleague if you'd like to suggest someone else. Yeah, that didn't make sense the way that I cut it off. And then, you know, a really kind thank you at the end. Thank you for your time. So that hits all of those pieces that we were talking about that make up a good outreach. Okay, then you're going to plan your questions. So there's 4 main types of questions: descriptive, relational, causal, and follow-up. So you want to make sure that you've planned questions in advance. These type of questions are going to have more meat to them than just like, so tell me about yourself, right? That's hard. But if you can say, can you describe your career path? That's better. Like, you know, you guys heard my career path earlier. I can do that pretty quickly and pretty concisely. Relational. So how are 2 things related? So using your major and your job, maybe that's something you're interested in. Causal. How is COVID affecting your profession? So this is getting at like, what's an issue for them now. And then follow up. You know, this should be a conversation. It's not like you're not just firing questions at them. It should feel engaging. As somebody who has conducted a ton of mock interviews, when it feels like a conversation, it feels much better than when I'm just firing questions. And so if you can build on something that they just said, oh, you mentioned this, can you tell me more about your role on that project? That's really interesting. Something like that, where you're really demonstrating that you're paying attention to what they're saying and listening well. Okay, so during the interview, the focus is that you want to make a connection to them. You want your body language to be open. You want to use good eye contact. You want to smile. You want to make it seem like you're engaged in the conversation. Make sure that you're listening more than you're talking. You can take notes, but don't be so engaged in taking notes that you're not actually looking at the person. Asking good follow-up questions shows that you're paying attention and that you're engaged in what they're saying, and modifying questions. So if they answer something and you're like, oh, that's basically this question that I was going to ask you next, change that next question or skip it. You don't have to just go down your list. And again, it's that idea of having a conversation will be the most meaningful. The other thing is that when you're at a conversation or an interview with somebody, you want to make sure that you can talk about yourself. So answering those questions from the beginning and talking about who you are, what are your skills, what's your value, those pieces are really important. And then you want to be sincere in your thank you. This is probably the most important part. So yes, okay, having the conversation is really important, but it's the relationship, right? So we're thinking about this on a long-term scale. This isn't a one and done. And so after the interview, you can send a thank you, a note. You can send something over mail, or you can just email them and say, I really enjoyed the conversation. This would be a great chance to be like, you know, I was on my way home, I was reflecting about this thing you said. Can you tell me a little bit more about this? Or, hey, you mentioned this one person that you thought I would be, would be a good person for me to talk to. Can I have that person's contact information? So something to kind of keep the conversation and the relationship going. And then it doesn't have to end with that thank you. You can do another follow-up. So, maybe a couple months down the road, you send them an email and say, hey, I was just thinking about this thing we talked about. Just wanted to check in and see how that project wrapped up for you. If there's an article about something that you come across in like a professional journal or one of your classes, share it with them if you think that would be interesting. I had a professor also tell me that she loves it when her students share things on social media. So if you see something, sharing it out is a really great way. Even if you're not sharing it directly to them, you could share it and be like, hey, I just saw this thing you put on LinkedIn and I shared it with my class or something like that. And then invite to interesting events. So if you end up talking about, like, say your capstone or something like that, and then invite them, say, hey, my capstone's coming up. It would be really great. I know you're probably busy, but I just wanted to let you know, here's the synopsis, here's the date. Even if they probably won't come, that's another right? That's another way that you're building this relationship with them over time. So doing whatever you can to stay connected and to build this relationship. Because it is 1 in 12 will end up in a job, but think about it. Don't you want to help the people that you know? Right? So if you can be a person that they know, then you'll be a person that they can recommend for a different job or a role that comes up. Okay, we have about 11 minutes. What are your questions? I feel like I talk really fast. So what questions do you have? What was unclear? What is still terrifying about this? Is it still terrifying? A little bit. Does it help though if you think about your friends? Think about how did you meet your friends? How did you become friends with your friends? You probably had something in common. You were in the same place at the same time. So you just have to make the same place, same time happen, right? But then come up with some common ground. And if you can do your homework ahead of time, that really helps. I think for me, it really helps to know that I'm not asking for something from them. I want to give them something. I want to be part of their network as much as I want them to be part of mine. And so if there's something that I can do to help. One other thing that you can do, one other type of question is kind of like, this is after you've built some rapport with them, but you could do a follow-up like, you mentioned this project that you're like really short-staffed on. Could you use an intern for this project? I'm really interested in gaining some experience. This is right at my alley. I have these skills that I could really help out with. Something like that, where you could help solve a problem for them. Or maybe you can connect them to somebody else. Oh, this isn't what I'm really good at, but I have this classmate that's really good at this thing. Or my neighbor was just telling me about this thing. Did you know about it? So it's not just you taking from them. It's that relational back and forth. You guys are helping each other. Does that make it a little less scary? I think starting with the Pacific Network and thinking about it as like a give and take helps me when I think about it. You know what also helps me is knowing that in-person networking events are not happening right now. So I don't have to be doing those things. It's more about, you know, reaching out to specific people, right? Another thing that is true, and I've seen it over and over again, is that everybody knows somebody. So even if you start with your neighbors or start with your parent's friend or start with your professor, even if they aren't doing the exact thing you're interested in, if you can be really clear about what you're looking for, everybody knows somebody, you know, like, I don't know how many times it's happened where somebody was talking about, you know, I was just talking to somebody and they're like, oh yeah, I want to be a teacher. Oh, my husband's a teacher. Let me connect you guys. Or I'm really interested in this initiative. Oh, did you hear about this person who's doing that? You know, if you can be specific, people will come up with ideas and ways to connect you. And so that's a really great way to practice, is with people you're already comfortable with. So practice with your roommates, practice with your professors, come in and practice with us. We're really good sounding boards. And I think that our brains are all tuned towards like, how many connections can I help with? How can I share? Which alums do I know that are doing cool things? And so we're a really safe place to really start that practice and kind of get into the mindset of how do you ask for these things? How do you talk about yourself? Okay, what questions? I can just keep talking, sorry. No questions. I covered absolutely everything. Any questions online? Well, we have about 8 minutes. Would you guys be interested in going through some of my LinkedIn slides? Is that something that you guys have already done? Do you have LinkedIn profiles? Yes? No? I don't know if they're in any sort of order because I just wasn't planning on doing them, but let's go through them. Because LinkedIn is really a great place to start. And honestly, we used to keep a list of what our alums are doing, but it was so hard for us to manage that we just use LinkedIn now. And so if you come into our office and say, I'm looking for alums, we're gonna be like, yeah, look on LinkedIn. And so knowing how to use it is really great. So this link is helpful, university.linkedin.com, LinkedIn for students. They have a whole tutorial. There's over 300 million users worldwide. 95% of recruiters use LinkedIn regularly. And LinkedIn is a job search site also. So yes, there's recruiters and there's connections that you can make, but there's also tons of job postings. And so you could do that job research on LinkedIn too. Okay, this actually, I saw a new statistic. If you add a photo to your LinkedIn profile, it's actually 12 times more likely to be seen. And so definitely put a professional photo in. If you update it regularly, it's more likely to be seen. It's the idea of building your network before you need it. So even if you're not going to start networking tomorrow, if you go ahead and have your profile up, you can even put it to public. And so recruiters can come and find you. Quality over quantity. You can pick your own URL. So it's not just a random string of numbers and letters. You can write your own name. Following groups, being active in groups, using the alumni tool, and joining the Pacific University group. Those are kind of like the high level things you should absolutely do when you start your LinkedIn profile. I'm just going to keep going until we run out of time. Unless somebody has questions, feel free to speak up if you have a question. Okay, so the first thing that you'll do, other than add your photo, is come up with a headline. And so what I see a lot for students is that they put their student. I'm a public health student. Okay, that's fine. That's fair. You are. But you can talk about what you're doing now, but also what you want to do. So it could be aspiring public health administrator, or, you know, it could be like a specific cause or something like that. So you could do something about what you're doing now and what you want to do later. And that's the headline is actually one of the most searchable functions. And so you're limiting yourself if you just say that you're a student, right? So you want to open up that and make it easier to be found by including something additional, like where you want to go with this. So don't just put students, do current and focused, and then you need to write a mission statement. And so your mission statement is going to be what goes into your summary. And so the summary is also very searchable on LinkedIn. And so recruiters will look at that. This is going to be talking about what motivates you, what you're good at, and also what you're looking for. So that's, again, that where are you at and what do you need? Are you looking to connect to people about opportunities, or are you looking to talk to people about what makes a good public health professional? What is it that what point are you at, right? So know your audience. Who are you writing to? Who do you want to connect with? Keep them short, lots of white spaces. Don't just use empty phrases and buzzwords. Use really authentic words. It's okay to use keywords, like if there's computer programs that you know really well or populations you want to work with, that's totally fine to include. But you don't want to overuse. I'm thinking specifically about like descriptive words about yourself, right? Write how you speak. You want it to come across authentically. You want to hook the reader. So you want to say something that's going to be memorable. So again, I know that category was super hard and I'm not sure what I would put in that category. But that fun facts about yourself, but this is a good chance for you to kind of think through that too. And again, being specific is helpful. I don't want to read, I will do anything, or I just want a job in public health. I want you to be more specific than that. Sharing appropriate personal details, so passions, values, interests, populations you want to work with, making sure that your value comes across. So again, what are the skills that you have to bring to the table? What are the classes you've taken? What's the information that you already know? And then the call to action, that's why are you writing this? Why do you want to connect with people? All right. Okay, so these are some that I like. Larry Thomas, I'm going to read the middle one. The achievement I'm most proud of didn't start with a business plan. It started in a dumpster. That makes me want to read more, right? And so yours doesn't have to be quite like that, but I think, you know, kind of thinking about what is unique about you. The top one, you know, digital consultant, community builder, workforce productivity catalyst. I bet that's not like an actual job title, right? I think she made that up, right? She thought about what she wanted to be known for and how she wanted to come across and made something up. And that's totally fine. Okay. So then your experience. So on a resume, I can really make the case for you to use all sorts of things as experience. So paid, volunteer, coursework, all of those things can fit into experience on a resume. And I think that I can make the case that they would be relevant as experience on your LinkedIn profile too, but they do have other things where you can do like leadership and organizations. And so kind of pick how you want it to show up for you. But include all the things you've been involved in, your education, honors and awards, courses, projects. And then you start to make connections. I think that pretty much gets, this is about where I started stealing slides to put them in the rest of my presentation. Any other questions? Okay, so advice to you guys, start this process. You already have those worksheets in front of you, start that, but then come in and see us. If you get stuck at any point along this process, we are available to help. So Rudy, Mike, Rose was in here too. All of us are career and academic advisors. And so we can definitely help you with your next steps. And so you can make an appointment with us through the ACA website. And I'm going to go back up to the top just in case anybody didn't have a chance to log in or to fill out the survey. But feel free to stick around if you have any questions for me. I'll hang out for a few minutes. I don't know what I did. Good thing the presentation's over. But let me know if you have questions and also come and see me. I'd love to chat with you guys in person.